Jerusalem in 3D, where geography meets prophecy. 3 massive valleys, 4 strategic hills, 1 spring of living water. Sounds like the setup for an ancient fortress, right? But here's the part that's easy to miss. Jerusalem wasn't just built to keep armies out. It was designed to draw people in. The same geography that made it the most defensible city in Judea also made it the epicenter of God's redemption story. It is his chosen address. Psalm 132, 13-16 lays it out. For the Lord has chosen Zion, he has desired it for his dwelling, saying, "This is my resting place forever and ever. Here I will sit enthroned, for I have desired it." NIV Bible. Translation: This place matters, but why this place? Why these specific hills, these particular valleys? You're about to discover that these natural features of Jerusalem shaped not just the city's history, but the story of our faith. As we walk these ancient paths together, I'll show you how a seemingly random collection of hills and valleys witnessed some of the most pivotal moments in God's redemptive story. They also became the stage for God's unfolding plan. From Abraham and Isaac ascending Mount Moriah to Jesus' final journey into Jerusalem on a donkey, every elevation, every depression, and every water source tells part of the greatest story ever told. But here's the catch. Today, it's hard to picture biblical Jerusalem underneath Burger King, the Nike store, and traffic jams. The city has changed a lot. So to understand the stories and how the setting shaped their plots, we have to remove 2,000 years of buildings, remove modern streets, and peel back the layers of time until we reach the city Jesus knew. Now that we can see Jerusalem as it was, let's get our bearings. Let me show you exactly where we're headed. Take a map of the Holy Land, find the Dead Sea's northern shore, and mentally draw a perpendicular line left to the Judean mountains. There it is, Jerusalem, perched atop a limestone plateau on the ridge of these Judean hills. Whether walking with David or following Jesus, this is our stage, a city set in the mountains. Now here's where it gets interesting. To see Jerusalem from a topographical standpoint, you would be underwhelmed. It's not perched like a jewel at the top of the Judean mountains within them. It lies on the rise in the bottom of a large bowl, with the rim of the bowl higher than the rise within it. So standing on these hills, you gaze down on the city. Picture God looking down at the Holy Land, considering where to place his chosen city. He had options, really good options. There was the coastal plain, prime real estate with sea views, perfect farmland and major trade routes, the ancient equivalent of beachfront property with a business license. The Jordan Rift Valley. It is a natural greenhouse with year-round fishing, seemingly endless agriculture, and a haven in the winter for snowbirds like Herod. Or the Transjordan Plateau, a cattle country with gentle hills, established trade routes, and enough farmland to feed an empire. But God chose none of these. Instead, he selected the Central Mountains, a rugged landscape of cliffs and narrow valleys that would give any invading army pause. The Dead Sea, the Rift Valley cliffs, and the Judean wilderness protected Jerusalem's east and south sides. Jerusalem's western flank was secured by the Shephahella foothills that acted like speed bumps for military marches. Also, coming out of the Shephelah, there were 2 deep canyons, the Cecilon Valley and the Upper Sorek, which functioned like moats, nature's own security system. To approach Jerusalem from the south, one had to travel the hill country watershed route, the road of the patriarchs. The deep canyons on both sides of the watershed limited travel along the spine of the Judean ridge, the same path that patriarchs Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob took. Though the north approach to Jerusalem was one of the easiest paths, the classic central ridge terrain still worked against you as you climbed up from the Benjamin Plateau. It was not an Olympic marathon rock climb, but each step was uphill. It was somewhat easier to approach Jerusalem from the north or south, along the ridge route, but access to the ridge route from either the coast or the Rift Valley was difficult. Jerusalem wasn't just protected on a grand scale that stretched from the Jordan Rift Valley to the Shephelah and the Benjamin Plateau down to the Negev. The city itself functioned as a fortress, encased in layers of natural defense. 4 notable hills, the Mount of Olives, the City of David, Temple Mount, and the Western Hill, stood watch over the landscape. 3 valleys bordered these hills, the Kidron, Central or Tyropoeon Valley, and the Hinnom. These steep ravines served as natural buffers, but also shaped Jerusalem's character by influencing its expansion and contraction. Let's begin our biblical geography tour here at the Eastern Approach, where Jesus often walked to approach Jerusalem. Coming from Mary and Martha's place in Bethany, you first encounter the Kidron Valley, a deep natural moat cutting between the Mount of Olives and Jerusalem's eastern edge. This ancient valley, fed by seasonal rains, begins near Mount Scopus in the north and descends southward, separating the city's eastern ridge from the Mount of Olives. This isn't your average valley. It's home to some prime biblical real estate, since its eastern ridge is home to two of Jerusalem's most sacred landmarks, the City of David to the south and the Temple Mount to the north. Following the Kidron southward, the valley floor continues its journey, merging with the Hinnom Valley south of Jerusalem, then cuts southeast through the Judean wilderness to empty into the Dead Sea in a spot that is about 10 miles south of where the Jordan River drains into the Dead Sea. But here's where things get interesting. When you walk the Kidron today, you're actually taking the elevated tour. The valley floor that witnessed biblical history sits 10 to 50 feet below your feet, buried under centuries of Jerusalem's accumulated past. As we journey through the Bible's pages, the Kidron Valley appears under different names. In Genesis 14, it's called the Valley of Shaveh, that is, the King's Valley. The significant location where the priest-king Melchizedek met Abram, brought bread and wine, and blessed Abram. Long before events would mark it as a place of significance, the Kidron Valley, its most familiar name, already told its story. Kidron comes from the Hebrew word kaudar, meaning to cause to mourn or to be dark, a name that perfectly captures its complex and often troubled history. This isn't just an arbitrary wordplay in Hebrew, but a title that mirrors significant events in the valley's sacred drama. From here, King David made his sorrowful ascent up the Mount of Olives as he fled from his rebellious son Absalom, his tears marking a path that would later be walked by another king. The valley's shadows deepened when Solomon transformed its southern slope on the Mount of Olives into what became known as the Mount of Corruption, establishing a place for worshipping foreign deities, Chemosh, Molech, and Ashtoreth. Just when the valley was about to hit rock bottom and descend into darkness, Kings Asa, Hezekiah, and Josiah initiated a royal renovation. They rolled up their sleeves, began a spiritual deep clean, and used the Kidron Valley as their dumpster. King Asa burned an obscene image of Asherah by the brook Kidron, while King Josiah used the fields of Kidron to destroy vessels dedicated to Baal and Asherah that had defiled the temple. Hezekiah removed the altars in Jerusalem and threw them into the Kidron Valley. The Kidron story demonstrates that it was not just another geographical feature. It served as a living symbol of spiritual transformation, from mourning to purification and from defilement to renewal. And while its eastern side knew darkness, its western slope housed the life-giving Gihon Spring, Jerusalem's primary water source and the power behind one of the city's most exclusive green spaces, the King's Garden. Water which flowed down the west side of the Kidron Valley through the water channel, and water which may have been diverted from the Siloam Tunnel of Hezekiah, watered the south end of the Kidron Valley near its confluence with the Hinnom Valley to produce a lush garden. This valley could be moat or garden, barrier or blessing. Not only would its life-giving waters prove to be a blessing in the past, but Ezekiel saw flowing water as a blessing in the future. The prophet may have referred to the Kidron Valley when he saw in vision life-giving water issuing from below the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east, to flow down through the Judean hills to heal the Dead Sea. He says, "There will be swarms of living things wherever the water of this river flows. Fish will abound in the Dead Sea, for its waters will become fresh. Life will flourish wherever this water flows." But while Ezekiel's vision pointed to the valley's future glory, another moment would etch the Kidron into the Passion Week forever. This valley would witness its most profound moment when an ancient journey and coronation from the past set the stage for salvation's grand entrance in the future. Imagine standing in this ancient ravine, watching history repeat itself with a divine twist. Centuries earlier, Solomon had journeyed down this very path on his father's royal mule, heading to the Gihon Spring for his coronation as king. It was here Zadok the priest anointed Solomon with oil as the people shouted, God save the King. Now, fast forward to witness another king, Jesus Christ, the Anointed One, choosing this same route. The parallels are striking, yet the differences are profound. Instead of a royal mule, Jesus selects a humble donkey. Where Solomon rode a royal mule, Christ chose a humble donkey. Where one journeyed to receive kingship, the other, king from eternity, journeyed to reveal it. It was the same valley, same path, sacred symmetry, yet a divine distinction. Solomon traveled toward an earthly crown of gold, Jesus toward a cruel crown of thorns. Solomon ascended a temporal throne, Christ reclaimed an eternal one. Through this valley, once named for darkness and mourning, passed the light of the world, not to begin his reign, but to perfect it, not to acquire his kingdom, but to redeem it. In Kidron's shadows, two kings traveled, one to be crowned by man, the other to be crucified by them, one to start his rule, the other to seal his forever. This time, Jesus is not coming to the holy city as just another pilgrim, he is coming as king. But that's just the eastern edge of our story. Move south down the Kidron, and you'll discover how Jerusalem's other valley, the Hinnom Valley, completes this divine fortification system. The Hinnom Valley carved a natural border between the tribal lands of Benjamin to the north and Judah to the south and west. While the Kidron Valley nurtures Jerusalem with life-giving waters, the Hinnom Valley tells a different, darker tale. Imagine walking these ancient paths and discovering that in this very valley, God's chosen people traded divine truth for deadly deception. They exchanged worship of the living God, the great I Am who parted seas and delivered nations, for cold statues named Baal and Molech. These false gods demanded the unthinkable, child sacrifice. The scriptures record that the Topheth in the valley of Hinnom was a site where children were made to pass through the fire or burned in the fire as offerings to Molech. The valley's very name reveals its tragic transformation through history. Initially known in Hebrew as Gay Hinnom, where Gay means a steep valley or ravine, this physical feature curved like a serpent around Jerusalem's ancient walls. But what began as a mere geographical landmark darkened into something more sinister. The valley became infamous as the site where some Israelites performed unthinkable acts, sacrificing their children to the god Molech. This horrific practice so defiled the place that it became synonymous with divine judgment itself. By Jesus' time, the Greek rendering of Gay Hinnom as Gehenna had evolved into the very embodiment of punishment, explaining why Jesus chose this word specifically when speaking of hellfire. This association was so powerful that even the Jewish oral law, the Mishnah, refers to the valley as the pit of destruction, a vivid reference to a place of eternal punishment. From a simple ravine to the very image of divine wrath, the Hinnom Valley stands as a stark reminder of how places like people can be defined by the choices made within them. Like shadows stretching through time, the valley's darkness reaches even into traditions about the story of Christ himself. For example, one tradition links this valley to the death of Judas Iscariot. As you journey east down the Hinnom's winding path, your eyes will find the Greek Orthodox monastery of St. Onufrius standing sentinel on the southern ridge. Here, tradition whispers, is where Judas, who betrayed divinity with a kiss, took his life. The valley's connection to betrayal doesn't end there. In addition, the money Judas received to betray Jesus was used by the priests to purchase a burial place in the potter's field, which was later called the Field of Blood, or Akeldama. A 4th century tradition places this field on the south side of the Valley of Hinnom. However, many scholars disagree with this tradition. But why did this sun-drenched valley become the picture of hell itself? Many have imagined it as an ancient garbage dump where criminals' bodies and rubbish burned continuously, where decaying human flesh mingled with the rotting garbage, and where fire always burned, smoke always lingered. It paints a vivid picture, but archaeological evidence tells a different story. The surprising truth: research confirms that there was no garbage dump in the Hinnom Valley, ever. Burning trash is a modern practice. Archaeologist Yigal Shiloh affirms that no ashes were found in Second Temple rubbish dumps. The real ancient garbage heap? It was in the Kidron Valley, with waste piled up 26 to 30 feet deep. Even more revealing, parts of the Hinnom Valley were sacred burial grounds during the Second Temple period. Archaeologists have discovered 69 Jewish tombs, some elaborately designed, including one possibly belonging to the high priest Annas himself. Would anyone bury their beloved deceased, especially a revered high priest, amid the smoke and putrid smell of a burning garbage dump? According to one scholar, no written record mentions Hinnom as a garbage dump until approximately AD 1200. So why did Jesus reference Gehenna as an eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels? Perhaps because children once burned alive here in pagan sacrifice, or perhaps because God renamed it the Valley of Slaughter after Babylonian forces trapped fleeing Jerusalemites there in 586 BC. The Babylonians came into Jerusalem by the front door, the middle gate, on the north, as the Jews fled out the back door through the gate between two walls and the potsherd gate down by the pool of Siloam. Anticipating an escape into the Hinnom Valley, Babylonians had soldiers waiting to ambush and slaughter them. The valley's geography speaks volumes too. In a world rich with symbolism, the Hinnom Valley, Jerusalem's lowest point, stood in stark contrast to the Temple Mount, which was perched at the top of the western hill. If the temple's height suggested heaven, then Hinnom's depths evoked Sheol, the underworld, and for the wicked, the kingdom of death itself. John Beck astutely observes that from the depths of the Hinnom Valley, we gain insight into how far Adam and Eve's descendants could fall. However, a 15-minute walk uphill and north from here takes you to Calvary, where Jesus paid the ultimate price for sin, even for transgressions as grievous as those once committed in this valley. Thus, this journey illustrates the vast distance between our brokenness and Christ's redemptive purpose during his final week in Jerusalem.